Welcome to the Jazz Flight Podcast. I'm your host, Darrell Scott, and together we will dive into the lives and careers of the jazz legends who have left a rhythmic imprint on the world. Be prepared to reminisce on the highs and the lows of their musical journey and the trials that sculpted their timeless musical gems. We'll preserve the legacy of these extraordinary maestros and find inspiration in the melodies of their lives. Subscribe now and never miss a beat. Now, let's get to the show. Welcome to the Jazz Flight Podcast. I'm Darrell Scott. Our guest has released 11 solo albums during his career. Some of the names are Soul Appeal, Everything Must Change, Alone Together, which I find interesting, Sax to Soul, and the latest one, which will be Looking Ahead. He's played alongside of one of the greatest voices I've ever heard in jazz, Randy Crawford. He's played with Brian Culbertson, Chuck Loeb, and he's performed for the royal wedding of the Denmark future king. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Michael Lington. Michael, welcome. Good afternoon. How are you?
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here with you, Darrell.
My first question in the intro, I just mentioned that you played for the royal wedding of the Denmark future king. How did that come about? Are you personal friends with the future king?
Actually, no. So I had never met him. So he's his name is Frederick, and I had performed for his mom and dad, which is the queen and the prince consort. So Denmark didn't have a king at the time, but Margaret II, who's still the ruler of Denmark, it was his son that got married to an Australian commoner, if you would believe it. They met at a bar during the I think the 2000 Olympics and fell in love. And it's a whole kind of a fairy tale story, because apparently for the first 3 months she didn't know he was the crown prince.
Oh,
so
nice.
I don't know if that's true or not, but it could have been. He was down there in Australia for the Olympics representing Denmark, and they somehow met and they had a courtship, and next thing you know, I think he tells her that he's the crown prince and wants to invite her to Denmark, and she came there. They fell completely in love and got married, and she started speaking Danish in like 6 months. It's unbelievable.
Wow.
And so how I ended up getting involved was because my stepdad, who was my music teacher when I was a kid, was also the drum major for the Queen's Guard. Mm-hmm. But he's also a very accomplished drummer and band leader. And so every time there was a royal party, whether it was just a party or a birthday or some sort, he was hired as the music director. So when it came to the wedding, he was also hired, mm-hmm. and he hired me. So nice. That's how I got involved in that. So I think I performed for the royal family about 4 times, something like that.
Nice. I bet those are some wonderful pictures, though. I can believe that. Now, you're born and raised in Denmark. So how did jazz filter down to you?
You know, Denmark is a very culturally rich country, and we have always welcomed and appreciated American music in general, but jazz in particular. As a matter of fact, a lot of famous jazz musicians moved to Copenhagen at some point. But I grew up just, my grandfather was a band leader and composer, music director, and such. And so just being around, and he was, by the way, he was band leader for some very famous people, American artists coming to Europe to tour. Him and Josephine Baker, for mm-hmm. one, were not only personal friends, but they worked together for many, many years. And Shirley Bassey, Fats Waller, the Mills Brothers. And so I was always surrounded with him. Going to his home, there was always stuff happening. Musicians came by, called. I saw him perform. He was on television. And so I think very early on, I got sort of the bug to do something in music. And then, of course, playing clarinet at first, but playing the saxophone led me to jazz and contemporary jazz. So the first the first artist I listened to was David Sanborn, Grover Washington Jr., and Cannonball Adderley. That was really what got me super excited about the sax, because they took jazz, but then they put their own little twist on it, and it was R&B, it was soul, it was funk, and I just liked all of that.
Wow. So Sanborn and Grover and Adderley are we'll call them your influencers as you're growing up. Are there more?
Oh, well, I mean, I started going back to like who did they
Oh, okay.
who inspired them, and one particular guy that was David Sanborn's hero was King Curtis.
Hmm.
So I taken into to King Curtis, um, but I also went back and studied the John Coltrane and Charlie Parker, and as much as I could appreciate their skill and music and musicality, um, it just was, I knew I wanted something a little more on the contemporary side, like a Grover, like a Wine Light, Mr. Magic, those kind of beautiful, beautiful songs. And it was just where I was at, because I also loved how they were able to transcend from jazz, but into many different genres. As a matter of
Hmm.
fact, Sanborn played on David Bowie's record and James Taylor, and I love the collaboration Grover with Bill Withers. I mean, I like that, was just more attractive to me.
How did you incorporate what you learned into your very own style? I mean, how do you do that? You're constantly listening to these other people, but yet and still, you've got to find a lane of your own.
You know what? You're absolutely right. That's a wonderful question, because a lot of times we mimic and imitate our heroes. And I was just in Mexico with a great sax player named Eric Darius, who's
Hmm.
a new guy on the scene, but is doing amazing things. And on the festival was also both of our heroes, David Sanborn.
Nice.
It's so funny, because we were having a conversation, and he was saying that when he met David Sanborn, and I did too, and he had the same advice for both of us. We were so influenced by his style and tone that we both said the same thing to him, but at different times,
Right.
many years ago. And that was, I got the same mouthpiece you play, and I've been listening to your records, and I think I sound almost like you. And he looked at going, as flattered as I am, you don't want to sound like me. There's already me.
Right.
You want to
Yeah.
sound like you. You got to find your voice. And I think Eric was 14 years old. I forgot when I first met David, I was probably 20, 21 maybe, or something like that. And he had said the same, you don't want to sound like me. You want to have your own voice. And I was like, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
So what's happening is that, and people ask me, I get the exact same question now that I'm in my 50s. People say, I bought your mouthpiece, I want to sound just like you. And I give the same advice. No, you don't. Those are all tools of the trade, and whatever makes you feel comfortable. But how do I then find my own voice is the next question. And the way I describe it to people is that you listen to all the people that you love. Take 10 of them or 15 of them, and then you have little pieces of each of them, 5%, 10% of each of them. But you pick the 5 or 10% that you want to sound like,
Right.
and you matches the way you want it. And essentially that decision to mix and match from all your heroes, all your influences, because nobody's going to match, nobody's going to take the same 5 or 10% of each. So the way you decide to compose those things becomes your voice. So that's my, and that's what I did. I ended up listening to a lot of different people, and then just kind of taking bits of, oh, I like that, oh, I like that, oh, I like that, and next thing you know, you have a completely different style than one single. You don't sound like one person.
So how did you migrate to America?
So in about 1988, it's a crazy story because I had started playing the sax for a couple of years. I came from the clarinet. I owned a small recording studio there with a buddy of mine, and so I knew a little bit about recording and sax and all that. And I'm walking downtown Copenhagen, and I literally, it's one of those things. Somebody's sitting at a cafe, and it's a friend of mine. She goes, "Oh, I want you to come over and meet so and so. His name is Mark Schulman. He plays drums with Richard Marx and Stevie Nicks, and they're here in town." I'm like, "What?" And I always had dreams about coming to America, but I didn't know how to and how to do it, and I didn't know anybody. So I literally clung on to this guy. But then
Hmm.
what was interesting, the reason I mentioned the studio thing was because he had a studio too. And all of a sudden we're talking studio stuff,
Right.
equipment and we had this sort of thing in common. And also, even though that, he was touring with big stars and I was just starting out, but we had sort of a common thing that we really could talk about. And he invited me to the show. And when I remember that show, I saw that show, I'm like, that's it. That's it. I'm going. So I said, Mark, before you leave, I want to come to America. He goes, okay, well, you know what? He goes, I got 6 months left on the tour. So if you're serious about it, call me and you can stay with me and we'll get you started.
Wow.
So I took that as an invitation. So I gave a notice of my apartment. I told my girlfriend I was moving to America and I sold my car. And after 6 months, I called him and said, Mark, this is Michael. He goes, who? "Oh, Copenhagen 6 months ago." He goes, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. What's going on?" I says, "Well, I'm ready to go. I'm coming next week." I'm like, okay. And I came and he did what he said he was going to do. He came and picked me up at the airport. I stayed in his couch for 2 weeks until I find my own place. And we're still friends to this day. He's one of my best friends. So,
So you get there, you're hanging out with your friend. Who are you playing with? Who are you meeting? How are
nobody.
you meeting?
Yeah, nobody. I mean, well, that was when you're 21 and I've always had it like let's just go and figure out. We'll figure it out when
Yeah,
we
when
get
you get there.
because otherwise I'll talk myself out of it. I'm very analytical. I'm from Denmark. We are all very compartmentalized and analytical. And I was like, if I start thinking too much about it, so I'm just like, I could just go and figure it out. Well, how are you going to do this? People asking me before I came over here. Well, how are you going to make it work? How are you going to make money? How are you going to, what about work permit? I don't know. I don't know. I'm just going to go. We'll figure it out. And here we are, 34 years later, and something got figured out.
Obviously, and it's working well for you. So, what was the first, if you can remember, what was the first thing you played on, or who was the first person you played with?
Well, how about the first person I met outside him?
Okay.
Dave Koz.
Oh, that's
I've been here for 4 days, and
ah,
and they knew each other because Dave used to play with Richard Marx,
yes.
and then they both played with Jeff Lorber.
Hmm.
They both and Mark, and then Mark played drums with Dave. And I didn't know who Dave Koz was because he hadn't released an album yet. So I've been on the couch for 4 days, and he says, "Michael, we're driving out to San Fernando Valley to a friend's house for his first record release party." Great. Who is it? Dave Koz. Don't know him, but that'll be great.
Yeah.
So we go out there and I meet Dave, and that was September 1990. That was 30, almost 30, 33 and a half years ago.
Wow.
And we have been, I mean, we have done a lot of stuff over the years and still am, I but yeah, so that was the first thing that happened. But nothing happened out of that meeting per se. So the first things I did was I tried to figure out how to meet musicians. So I would, God, what did I do? I mean, I guess somebody would say, you should go to this jam session. You should go there. Then I met somebody. Then I got a club date. Then somebody said, hey, somebody has a wedding on next weekend. You want to play? And little by little, a lot of times, even touring musicians, like famous touring musicians, when they're not touring, instead of doing nothing in town, they'll go and play a corporate party or a wedding or a bar mitzvah. So I found that was an extremely great way to meet people doing these corporate parties, because I remember one of the first things I did the bass player, his name, bless his heart, he's no longer with us, but his name was Bob Birch, and he was Elton John's bass player.
Mm.
And we were at the Friars Club in Beverly Hills doing a bar mitzvah or something like that, you
Right.
know? I mean, and I was like, wow, that's a great way to meet people. So,
Oh, nice. Now you play the sax. Now I've been remotely involved in jazz for a long time. I understand that there are many different variations of sax.
mhm,
Soprano, alto, baritone. I may not know all the names. Which
sure.
ones do you play
All
first
you
of
got to
all?
think about is the human voices. It's named exactly after the human voice.
Oh, okay.
Baritone, bass, um, soprano, tenor, alto, sopranino. It's named after the human voice.
Wow. And which ones do you play? Or you play them all?
I don't. I could, it's just a matter I don't own them all because I was never really a bari or a bass player. A bass saxophone is pretty rare, but baritone is pretty common, mostly in big band settings.
Hmm.
Um, but I started on the alto, and then once I discovered the tenor sax, I was like, "That's it. That's the one for me." And so I played tenor for many years, and then I got my first tour with Bobby Caldwell, and he only liked the alto.
Mm.
I mean, he was notorious for only liking the alto sax. As a matter of fact, he was having people that not only toured with him or recorded with him that was known tenor players, and he asked them, "Can you play alto?" That's how much he loved the alto.
Wow.
Then when I started with Bobby, it was back to the alto, and then there was during that time, there was something that happened where I really felt I found my voice with that. And then after that, I started making. That's when I made my first album in 1996 or seven, and it was all alto. I think I might have doubled something on tenor, but it was all alto. Then I met Brian Culbertson, and we went out to do some tours together, and he likes tenor. So it's like it was just has
Going
been
back
back.
and forth.
But for my solo records, it's predominantly been alto. Every now and then I'll sneak in a tenor song. I play soprano too. I recorded a couple of songs of soprano over the years, but I don't quite connect with the sax. I mean, you got guys like Branford Marsalis or that just sounds so amazing, and I was like, it's just not going to be me. So
So tell us the feeling. You're in Denmark, you're having some success. You come over here, you're sitting on the couch, you meet people. And then a few years later, or however long it took, you put out your first record. What's that like?
well, I mean, it was Bobby Caldwell was very, very instrumental in making that happen for a few different reasons. For one thing is I took over from Boney James in Bobby's band, and as soon as I started, Bobby said, I've had an incredible lineage of sax players, starting with Richard Elliott, then Dave Koz, then Boney James, now you. So you should make a record. This was within the first week or two of me starting touring, and do it quick before it's too late.
Hmm.
And, and then it took me a year and to kind of get it all together. And I asked Bobby if he would sing on the album. He says yes. And then I got a record deal. I mean, it was just kind of all happened like that. And then I made my first album. I think I recorded in 96. It came out in 97. And it actually, I think we're on album number 13 now.
Wow.
Something like that. Yeah.
It it's funny. You say you played with Bobby Caldwell, and it's horrible that it's many, many years ago. But I saw Bobby Caldwell at a theater here in Cleveland. It was a
Yeah.
theater in the Round.
Oh,
So
yeah.
now I wonder, were you there? Was Dave Koz there? Was Boney
What
James
year?
there? Pardon me?
What year? What year? I can
Dude,
tell you.
I do not remember the year. The only
So
thing I
I
can remember is this, and I probably shouldn't say this. He was really loud, loud. I mean, people walked out because he was so loud.
Interesting.
But I have enjoyed Everybody Wants to Hear What You Won't Do for Love. My favorite song by Bobby Caldwell is Jamaica.
Oh,
Uh,
that's
I,
one of my favorite songs. Coming Down from Love and Jamaica are two of
yeah,
my favorite songs of Bobby's. You know, great.
and I think it's amazing once you go back and start trying to tie people together and this whole lineage of yourself, Richard Elliott, Koz, Boney James, and it's like, and I want to go. I should have paid more attention to the shows, to keep track of who was in the band and so forth and so
See, the
on.
thing is, Bobby's show was such a like we were his sidekick in a way. He loved the saxophone, the
Mhm,
alto. And he always like what you won't do for love. At the end, it
mhm.
was he didn't care how long it was. Just continue building and building and go into so everybody goes into a frenzy. So after he sang a couple of verses, it was literally a 5 minute sax solo. And we all did that. So every song he always incorporate those songs. Heart of Mine had sax all over it. I mean, there was so many songs that utilized sax, and so it was sort of a springboard. It was a beautiful. Actually, it was probably one of the best starts you could have because Bobby loved the sax. He loved to feature, and he loved to let it known that this guy right here took over from so and so he's your next guy right here. So
Mhm.
he enjoyed being that guy to lift the next guy up, and it was actually after I left, it was a part of his whole thing about who's next and who's the next guy.
So was there pressure on you then to go, well, Richard Elliott was here before me, and Boney James was here before me, and Dave Koz was here before me. Now I've got to live up to this, we'll call it reputation, but then you also have to move on to a solo career because everybody behind you did that.
Right. Well, the thing is, by that time, you have to remember, before I joined Bobby, I didn't even I mean, I thought "What You Won't Do for Love" was a Go West song.
Oh, the band?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they had a huge hit with that song in Europe
Oh,
because
wow.
see, Bobby Caldwell. So "What You Won't Do" came out in '78. Okay,
Hmm.
Bobby's first. I was 10 years old living in Copenhagen, and it just that was just before. And then mid 80s, probably 85, 84, 85, Go West, this British band, makes a version of "What You Won't Do for Love." It's a massive, I don't know if it was a big hit in America too, but it was a big hit all over Europe. So I thought when I came to America in 1919 that "What You Won't Do for Love" was Go West. So um when I got invited to Bobby's band, actually, you know what? Mark Schulman, the same guy that brought me over, played with Bobby too. And I remember being at his house, and he was just about to start the gig, so he had all of Bobby's album CDs there at his house
Hmm.
to listen to. And I remember flipping over the CDs, and I see "What You Won't Do for Love." I'm like, oh, he did a cover of Go West. It goes the other way around. I'm like, what? So
Oh,
anyway, so then yeah, a few years later, I was invited in, but uh now I forgot a little bit why we got on that tangent, but I wasn't. Oh, I know what you were asking me about, the pressures of taking over from Boney. So I wasn't super familiar. You remember this was 1994, so all of them, Richard and David. I think Richard actually started making his first album in like '87 or '88, so he
mhm.
was the first one. But again, David Sanborn was my guy. Grover was my guy. So I wasn't too familiar with their music prior to me joining Bobby's band. So I didn't really know how big of a deal it was. I was just so happy I didn't have to do bar mitzvahs anymore. I could and tour, around the world.
Talk about your style of music and how you create the music that you create and the sound that you have created because it's a very unique sound. Talk about that.
Well, I think my sound, my musical style, I should say, maybe not much my sound, but my musical style has changed. Um, quite a bit since I made my first album. And I try to find things that really at the moment in time when I start writing for a new album or releasing an album, whatever maybe I'm listening to and what I'm influenced by, um, those are the things that influences my writing at the time. And it's a feeling. I gotta find for me what excites me. That's how I make the records. I mean, this selection of songs. Right now, I just started writing for a new album, and people are sending me ideas, and it's so apparent. Like, I like this, but I'm not really feeling this for now. Then
Right.
I'm like this. So it's very apparent that I'm right now, without even being able to describe what it is. I'm in a musical zone right now of a style or a feeling. So when these things come in, it's clear to me what can work and what doesn't work, you know? And in
Hmm.
5 years from now, that could be different, you know? Now, I will say though, with the albums that I did in Memphis, most of it in Memphis, when I kind of went back and did some of that King Curtis feeling music, I did 3 albums. I did Soul Appeal, Second Nature, and Silver Lining, and we recorded it, most of it in Memphis Royal Studios with Memphis musicians, arrangers, and we even had William Bell and people like that singing on it. That was a very specific idea to go back and do some of that super original soul, very like your Stax record. Like if had been signed to Stax record in 1963, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So that was a very specific project. But right now I'm writing. I'm kind of I've moved, it's not what I do right now. Right now I'm start exploring more of some of that Grover Sanborn stuff that I cut my teeth to, but making making it
Right.
and you hear some of that even in this album I just released, Looking Ahead. Songs like South Bay, and you'll hear some of that funk and soul and some of that um, you'll hear some of that influence, and I like that feeling right now. For me, that feels really good to me.
Hmm. Not only am I looking forward to hearing that CD, but I'm going to lobby to get a case of wine. All right, did I say that? Because I hear you have a wine?
Well, I started with a line of cigars in 2006, and then I got a call from I had dinner with many years ago. I kind of sort of remember the dinner, but he's like, I met you and I know cigars. I'm a fan of your music. Well, I own a winery in Paso Robles, California. I think you should have your own line of wines, and I'd love to make it for you. So why don't you come up here and say hello and taste some wine? We'll see what we can do. That's how it's kind of wild. But he says, yeah, I've been having you in mind for a while, and now's the time. So
How, how does that make you feel? Some guy walks up to you and goes, I got this wine and I think you should be the face of the wine. How does that happen? He's a
well, the
fan
first
of the
thing I
music?
do want to know, it wasn't just me being the face of an existing wine. He wanted to create a new wine, like different blends and so on, for me. I mean, it wasn't like just putting my name on a wine that he made. He's a grower, so he has like 14 different varietals that he grows. So we can do anything we want, and
Wow.
which we did. So the first one we made was a sort of a Paso Robles style Bordeaux blend, which is usually three different grapes. Ours were Petit Syrah, Petit Verdot, and Merlot. So that's our version of a Bordeaux blend. We call it trio because it's 3 grapes,
Right.
and tied in the music. Then we came up with a white wine. It's a very specific varietal called Viognier, which is a French Rhone varietal. And we called that the soloist because it's just one grape. And then we had a reserve Cabernet we call Maestro, the leader of the orchestra,
Right.
the big guy. So,
So are these only available in California or can
you know
we?
what I'm afraid to tell you, they
Okay.
have There was 750 cases of each, and they've all been drank, not by me. So
Okay.
we're looking so right now we have no white, but we're looking to redo. It's quite a project to get something like this underway. So we're looking to do some more at some point. But for right now, I hate to tell you, it's gone.
I'm so depressed. So tell me about the cigars then.
Yeah, well, that was an idea that came because the one of the one of the first jazz cruises I went on, back when they had beautiful cigar lounges on the ship.
Hmm.
Uh, I was asked to host an event where I didn't play, like a non-music event, just to be able to connect with my fans and fans of music in a different way. And so the idea came up of creating like a cigar party, in the cigar lounge. And you know, I had a friend I had a friend that was in the cigar business, and I asked him, could we create my own line of cigars for that? And he said, well, yes. The good news is that we can do it. The bad news is that you have to make 450 boxes. So, I said, well, there's no way we're smoking 450 boxes. There's 20 in a box. There's like 3,000 cigars in 1 hour. That's not going to
Wow.
happen. So, yeah. So he said, but sell what you sell or whatever, smoke what you smoke, sell the boxes, and all the rest. He goes, I'll sell it out of my store. So we did it, and it was a great success. And for we just basically we just made it all happen.
Are they still available? Can people still get them?
There are a little bit of remaining stock, yeah, a
Okay.
little bit of remaining stock left. But again, that's another. I don't know if I'll continue that because
Okay.
tobacco laws are very, very tough to deal with, import and export. They were all handmade in Honduras, and
Mm.
importing it from there and stuff. It's very time consuming. So there is another company I'm talking to right now that are interested in doing a new line. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see. Right now, back then when I did it, I didn't have a family. I didn't have
Uh,
kids, and so I had the extra time to do that. So, um, I have a feeling at some point is all going to happen again with the right relationship. Like
excellent.
it'd be nice if like Fuente would come to me saying, "Michael, we love your music. We want to make your line of cigars." I'm all in. Or Davidoff, something like that. That would be a beautiful partnership.
Your career is tremendously interesting to me. I mean, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. You need a book. You do. And a chapter on the different subjects from being in Denmark to getting over here to the how you started out to getting the solo project to doing what you're doing to the cigars to the wine. I think that would be very interesting because I think most people think of musicians as kind of all you do is play. That's all you do. We don't know what else you do, which is always one of the things I look for when I do these interviews of finding out what else is it that you do to kind of get your brand out there. And I think
Well,
that,
it's interesting you say that because I did find, and I didn't realize that at the time, but I did find that having these other ventures outside music um, gave me, well, first of all, I met so many amazing people that I probably would have never met,
hmm
because whenever it comes to wine or cigars, it's a tight niche, but it's a very strong community. When
yes,
you're
it is.
about either or both, I mean, those are people that they they're really, really passionate about that, and you meet some amazing folks all over. And sometimes I would be in connection with a concert, would have a pre or post cigar event, and it's just a wonderful people I've met through that. But also in interviews talking about new music, people love not just music. It would be like, okay, let's hear about the new record. Okay, great. Well, tell me about the new record. Great. Okay. Now let's talk about the cigars and the wine, much
R-
like what we're doing here.
Right.
I, people found it interesting that there is more than just the music.
there's more to you
Right,
than just the music. Well,
right.
let me say this has been fun. It's been very educational. As I constantly say, I've learned things. You're a heck of a guy. You are. Um, and I'll pay attention to those things. So I appreciate the time. I'm sure our listeners appreciate the time. Uh, you're going to get included on my Facebook page, so you'll see everything that I see. Whatever you have that comes out, please let us know. We
Sure.
will do our best to publicize it and
Can I tell you something that I'm
sure,
super excited about is
yeah.
happening in the beginning of the year? Okay, so there is an amazing venue here in Southern California, in Seal Beach, California, to be specific, that they just expanded, and a lot of people that you would know play there. But I am launching. It's called Spaghettini Jazz Lounge, and it started back in the day as an Italian restaurant. Now they have a whole separate music venue, and it is an unbelievable place. I mean, top rated artists coming in there, but sound, lights, cameras, the whole thing, and it's absolutely gorgeous. But next year I am launching a new series called Sax to Soul,
Hmm.
and it's where I'm going to bring in guest artists. So I wanted to bring in artists sort of outside the jazz format, so a little
Okay.
more sort of on the soul and R&B side. So
Hmm.
we're launching January 8th, and doing one every month for January, February, March, and April, and then probably this will be an annual thing. But so March, I start. You know what? So I'm going to start with the last one,
Okay.
which is April 22nd. My special guest is Marcus Miller,
Oh,
legendary bass
nice.
player and composer, producer. Obviously, I this is going to be super special for me because all of that music that Sanborn was playing, he either wrote or
Right.
produced
Right.
or played all of it.
Yep.
So we're gonna have a lot of fun. Then on March 2nd, my good buddy from Shalimar, Howard Hewitt's going to be my
Nice.
special guest. And then February 19th, Regina Bell,
Hmm.
uh, who I've never worked with, but I'm very excited about doing this thing with her. And then January 8th, and I'm laughing because he has another show a month later in kind of the vicinity, so we can't announce him, but
Hmm.
it's one of the biggest stars in our format and beyond. And we can only say this is the advertising says, trust us. But what does that mean? Trust
I,
us.
I,
Just try. You have to
I,
look at the other artists, and then
right.
when I say this, trust us. Don't miss it.
All right. You'll have to let me know. I have seen, I think it's Facebook or Instagram. I have seen your spaghettini thing.
Yeah.
Um, that means I have to get up to California. If not, I can really impress my brother-in-law who lives in LA.
Well, there you
Um,
go.
who I can get him. I'll give you his name and everything, and he can
Yeah,
do the review and everything.
sure.
So now we add concert promoter to your list of titles.
Concert, I mean, yeah, I guess you could say that it's a Michael Lington preset, so it's more of a curator than a
Okay.
concert promoter. But you can look at it the same way. But another thing, which is a unique thing with this series, is that we're adding a VIP pre-event, which is a Q&A, meet and greet, photo op with some charcuterie and wine. We'll
Cigars.
do that. So because usually when you go and see these artists in a festival, it's 4,000 people. You're way back there.
Right.
You Here it's 160 seats. That's it.
Man.
And there's not a bad seat in the house the way they've done this. And then you can come early, and there's 40 seats available for the pre-event. We're only selling four. It's a little add-on, and it's super reasonable. It's like a $35 add-on, and you can come there and be a part of a super intimate little session before the show, and then we'll kick it off, and who knows what's going to happen. I'm already getting requests from all of these artists to play this song with them, that song with them. I'm going to have, I mean, it's going to just be a lot of fun.
Trust me.
Yeah. January 8th, trust me.
Trust me. All right. Michael, greatly appreciate the time. We're going to look forward to all these things. I truly appreciate it. Thank you for being patient and both of us being kind of agile on how we got this done.
Yeah. Thanks for
And
your patience too.
Not a problem, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the Jazz Flight Podcast. My name is Daryl Scott. Join us again next week. Thank you for tuning in to the Jazz Flight Podcast. I hope you enjoy these stories and soulful melodies that grew through the doors of time. If you want to stay connected with the latest updates and episodes, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Until next time, I'm Daryl Scott.